Um, Thank you, Stacy. For those who don't know me, my name is Lindbergh Matillano. I'm the director of cost optimization at Avalara. How many of you have heard of Avalara? Raise your hands. Great, we save you guys on taxes, hopefully. Um, I manage the FinOps program at Avalara as well as the software asset management. So I'm also excited that we're seeing a lot of that nowadays.
Hey everyone, I'm Sonny. I'm head of product at Stacklet. Previously, I was at Capital One and Hulu, working with the cloud engineering teams there. And yeah, excited to talk about scaling governance, also maintaining on the CNCF project Cloud Custodian. Lindbergh, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. All right, so obviously we love FinOps. FinOps is great, but oftentimes FinOps programs fail, right? And why do they fail? Oftentimes programs try to do too much. They overpromise. There's lack of executive buy-in, or what they promise to deliver takes too long. And oftentimes it's a reactive culture that oftentimes sees it as a one-time effort, and then you don't need the FinOps program anymore, right? So some organizations do that. But the reality is FinOps programs fail because we're not creating sustainable results and governance. So one of the things, I don't know if we have some engineers here, you're probably familiar with the words mean time to resolution. Oftentimes, once you detect a savings opportunity, it does take time, right? There's detection, there's notification, you get a Slack, you get an email. And then hopefully your engineers are taking action. But between that notification and then action, that could be hopefully just hours, but oftentimes it may take weeks, months. A quick show of hands, how long does it on average take you to resolve an issue? Is it more than a week? More than a month? All right. How many can proudly say that it only takes less than an hour? No one raised their hand, because I would love to meet you. So, and then finally, when you actually do that optimization or realize that savings, that's great. But you can see in that time, that red line represents your opportunity cost, right? You just lost, let's say that's $200,000, which is actually probably on the low end, $200,000 worth of opportunity costs that you could have spent elsewhere, invested elsewhere. That's why mean times to savings really is a very important measure for organizations as you evolve your FinOps program. It creates this sense of action that your engineers are very familiar with, right? Engineers love to gamify the results. They can proudly say, hey, my mean time to resolution is less than an hour, few minutes. Well, now they can also say that, hey, my mean time to savings is in minutes. If I didn't take any action, we could have spent $1 million unbeknownst, right? So, in terms of mean time to savings, it definitely is a good way to measure and focus action. Identify where the bottlenecks are. Is it the notification? I mean, is someone sending an email and then just waiting for action to take? Is there no follow-up? Is it not going to the right places? It drives accountability to teams. If you say, hey, you know what? Your mean time to savings should be a few hours, and they're taking weeks or months, you can say, hey, how can I help you get down to seconds or minutes? And it's really a good lever to drive FinOps optimization and governance. It's a good way to encourage teams to further automate, or even better yet, prevent.
Yeah, thanks, Lindbergh. So when we talk about driving action with clear communication, part of it is you need to embed inside of developer workflows. So engineers, cloud resource owners, they're not necessarily going to love going into a separate console to go and find those resources that they need to optimize. In addition, embedding into those workflows allows you to get buy-in earlier from the engineering teams because they see the action items and they see the Jira tickets or other type of communications directly into the places they already know and love, and sometimes maybe not love entirely. But the other part of this is even if you embed inside of these native developer workflows, you still need to have that collective location where you can see all the results and all of the resource opportunities in one place. So something like an action center where you can see that clear list of requests, actions, and fixes is super important to helping users also prioritize outside of maybe a ticketing system as well. And the title of the talk is talking about balancing win now versus win long term. When we look at the sliding scale of effort versus savings, we can break it into two different axes for both of those, right? What are your high savings opportunities? What are your low savings opportunities? What are your high effort opportunities and what are your low effort opportunities? And generally speaking, we want to stay in that top right column where we're doing the easiest thing that has the highest impact. Some examples of this, storage classes, for example, going from something that is standard to infrequently used based off of metrics is super easy to do. Unused instances is another example of things that literally just don't do anything, shut it off and save money. Log and data lifecycle policies, another easy example of things that people often overlook but can result in spiraling data costs. But then there's also the other end of the spectrum, which is hard and high savings, right? So tagging at scale, tagging sometimes is super difficult to do because you just don't know who to talk to. It may not pay dividends immediately in terms of bottom line savings, but has high impact on the rest of your FinOps opportunities. Underutilized compute and off hours, these are things that require some amount of developer buy-in and potential re-architecture to ensure that these are capable. So, there's a wide gamut of these different opportunities. But ultimately, what we want to do is we want to move everything up and to the right. So the key part of this is, these things that may seem difficult oftentimes are the result of a lot of manual effort, right? So it's engaging with developers and asking them to do things. It's going and investigating for hours at end to what your potential opportunities are. And that's where automation and policy governance really step in and help you to move a lot of these disparate, difficult things up into the right for easy and high impact savings.
So one other thing you can do to drive action and create both immediate and long-term wins. I don't know if any of you guys were in the CIA conference presentation, which was pretty cool. I was kind of worried, but in that session, they talked about how they have campaigns and focus on specific things. And so at Avalara, we also have what we call campaigns. They're essentially time-boxed, very specific actions, right? If you think about marketing campaigns, there's back to school and all of that, things that are going on. It draws you to, oh, I need to go back to school. I need to buy stuff, these spending. So campaigns in our world, in FinOps, really is about a time-box focused effort that we can have our engineers look at. It drives urgency, right? Like we're gonna focus this time on deleting unattached EBS volume. So the entire engineering organization is spending, that day focused on or that time period focused on deleting EBS volumes. That creates visibility. It clearly defines what needs to be done. And you can also track and gamify it, right? So at Avalara, we've done that in the past where we've gamified and challenged our engineers to focus on a specific action. And we show like each week how various VPs, teams are doing and rank them on a regular basis, week over week, just to show, hey, how you're doing. And what we show really is kind of be like, who's saved the most? Ultimately, our company, Avalara overall wins because we're all, everyone wins because we're saving, but it's kind of that pride from the teams like, hey, I'm actually driving a lot of savings. Not only in terms of volume, right? There's some groups that will save more just because they have a volume, but there's also in terms of percent of change, right? How much actually have you achieved your savings? I think sales the Salesforce presentation talked about coin. We use something similar, but trying to drive savings and through various behavioral things like campaigns and gamification, create this focus and help you win in the immediate term, but also hopefully you've taught the engineers something like, oh, that was a very painful exercise manually deleting EBS volumes. Maybe I can go automate it, right? Or I can even prevent that in the future. What can I do? So I don't know how many of you feel like FinOps is like whack-a-mole. Quick raise of hands, right? You've done a great job, that EBS volume, you smashed it, and then the next quarter, it's starting to go up again, and you have to smash it again. That's always the same. That's always going to be the case with any type of compliance or operations, right? Where it always is going to be a game of whack-a-mole. But one way you can prevent that or make it less of a game of whack-a-mole is create various policies, right? Preventive policies that actually prevent the issue from occurring, or detective and remediations that quickly detect the issue and allow the engineers to quickly remediate it. So those two things together allow you to create sustainable, longer-term savings or wins.
Yeah, and back to the point in terms of the MTTS, that mean time to savings, everything costs money, especially in this consumption model where you're billed per second. So there is a difference in your mean time to save. There's an actual deliverable cost savings there. To your point in terms of different types of policies, policies without enforcement are just suggestions. And generally speaking, we're not in the business of suggestions, we're in the business of helping people save money. We do that in two ways. One is in shift left, or IAC governance, infrastructure as code governance. Start small, right? Find those policies that are easier for your engineers to implement. Beginning in warrant-only mode, embed in that developer workflow where you show them the suggestions inside of their GitHub PRs, just to make it as easy as possible to do the right thing. Provide clear and very actionable guidance, because at the end of the day, if you give someone something that's not exactly clear on what to do, they're just most likely not going to action on it. And then from a runtime side of things, we want to detect what can't be predicted. So you may be able to say people can't use a certain instance class, but you can't necessarily understand or know ahead of time if that instance is going to be properly utilized. We handle this in two ways, so both in a polling fashion, so do a periodic checkup of how your resources are doing and remediate or take action on the ones that aren't in compliance with your cost FinOps policies. But then we can also do these in real time. So if a user, let's say they're launching an instance that has a GPU attached to it and they're not part of the machine learning team, that's probably pretty questionable, right? So having automated actions that go and stop that instance that then sends a notification to the user and asks like, hey, why did you do this? Or you need to file an exception. These types of workflows that allow you to give users the flexibility to move fast, but also in a way that's safe. And again, feeding that insight back into the IAC, being able to take the changes that you make as a result of your policy actions and get your developers to ensure that those are codified inside their IAC for the long term. When we look at these possible workflows that we have, so things like off hours, being able to turn off the lights, right? Turn your instances off at night, send a notification to your users that, hey, we've done this. If you're surprised that there's downtime, that's why, and then waiting until a certain time to turn them back on. These multi-step policy workflows enable you to give that flexibility to the user and also save up to maybe 60%, right? If your instances are only up for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's a pretty significant savings just in compute. The other example here is snapshot cleanup. I don't know how many of you have hundreds, thousands of snapshots that you're saving away for a rainy day and in the hopes that you'll be able to recover your system. A lot of times they go unused. If somebody really needs it and they respond to your notification, you can tailor that into that exception workflow to ensure that you're not doing anything that's surprising to your users. And then finally, enabling AI. So how do we use AI to help with people that are new to policy development? How do we enable you to go from intent to query and intent to policy as fast as possible. We want to, take the questions that you have about your cloud and be able to express them in a natural language way. So be able to just talk plain English to your cloud. Enable self-service to your engineers as well if they have questions about the cloud, and be able to take your policies from intention directly into deployment in your development environment, production, without having to necessarily understand the full breadth of technical nuance that you need to do. And then when we look at policy adoption in terms of the classic crawl, walk, and run stages, the crawl stage, we're really mostly focused on communication, right? Trying to engage stakeholders, trying to get them to understand that there is a need for policy, there is a need for guardrails and governance, and doing simulations like dry runs to help you understand what the impact of these policies may be. And of course, like I said before, try to stay up and to the right in terms of those high impact, low effort policies to really capture as much savings as possible when you're starting out. The next category here in terms of walk, being able to enable these runtime policies that are in enforcement mode so that they're no longer suggestions to your users, and sending those automated notifications and really embedding and working through clear action to help you with your general posture. IAC as well, if you have users that are using Terraform, the best time to catch it is actually earlier in the deployment pipeline, because every single stage that piece of infrastructure goes through, it's basically a 10x increase in the amount of time and effort that it takes to remediate that finding. Like changing a line of code is 5 seconds of your time, but changing it in production might be a week. And holding that sync across your cross-functional teams helps you understand what policies are important to them and what policies may be incompatible with things that are sort of technically challenging as well. And to Lindbergh's point, using leaderboards, campaigns, these are all tools that can help you engage your developers and make sure that everybody is on board with this, and it's not just like someone is telling me to help save money. They feel engaged and empowered to actually do the right thing. And finally, in the run stage, this is continuous usage optimization. So you have automated remediations that are going and taking care of the things that are misconfigured, that are super costly. You're blocking your IAC deployments from a FinOps perspective if they're not matching the goals that you have. And you're working through that last 20%, all those items in the bottom left corner where they're hard, they're difficult to do, but you still see the value in them. You're driving that through automation. And of course, leveraging the powers of LLMs, or large language models, to be able to help you recommend and talk to your engineers and have them implement policies on their own behalf and self-service that, because oftentimes they have better context on how they can best adopt these sort of FinOps best practices. So it's been great chatting with you all. Lindbergh, if you have any last comments, if you have questions, feel free to come down and visit Stacklet down the expo hall. Lindbergh, any last comments?
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for having me on the stage with you. This is great. I think one of the things that really is important as you think about winning in the short term and long term, you need to focus on where your developers are, right? They are the ones that are driving a lot of the costs. So tools you pick, what channels you notify them, it's important you make sure that you're in those communications and those channels. If your developers love to use Slack to send notifications, right? If they love getting stuff in Jira, make sure those things are sent over to Jira so that's in their workflow. If you lower the barrier for them to do the right thing, people will do the right thing, right? So a lot of these things, winning, now and then in the future, really is about just changing user behavior. And the best way to do that is make it as easy as possible for them. And I think a lot of the things we've talked about is not necessarily hard or secret, right? We all know that we often try to change behavior, with our kids, with a bunch of different things. But ultimately, if you make it easier for your developers to do the right thing, they will do the right thing. If you make it easier for them to identify and remediate, they'll do that. Like ideally, they love to do automation, right? No one wants to go manually delete, unattached EBS volumes, right? They'll create an automation for that. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's really winning short and long term is really about just changing human behavior. All right, thank you, everyone.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.